All right, in this little lecture, we're going to talk about the experimental design, because what we're going to do is we're going to redesign the Cheeto lab that you guys did at the beginning of this unit. You guys are going to redesign this lab in order to study a specific question. So let's take a look and see how scientists go through the experimental design process. All right, first off, we need to know, we need to kind of discuss, why do scientists experiment? All right, so scientists are a lovely bunch of people, sometimes quirky, always passionate, sometimes a little bizarre. These guys are the curiosity seekers of this world. So scientists experiment because they are curious about how the world works, okay, or how things of this world work. They want to know why, what's driving it, why is it doing it, okay? So in order to figure out why, scientists have to do experiments to basically look at one thing at a time. So the experimental design is a systematic just means step by step, right? So a step by step way to figure out how the world works, and then from there, how we can solve problems. All right, so I kind of don't want to put like numbers next to these, but I'm gonna anyways. Okay, so just know that this experimental design process does not always follow these 6, rules or steps in order. They may go out of order depending on what you find at each step. You may set up your question and then define your variables, and then have to rethink about what you're doing and then redo your question again. Okay, so all of these steps are like the scientific method. It doesn't always happen in the exact same order. Okay, so just kind of a little heads up there. Okay, but for you guys that are kind of starting out and not expert scientists in any sort of field, these we're going to do these steps in order for this Cheeto redesign lab. So the first thing you want to do is always identify the question or the problem, all right, that needs to be solved. So that's the first step no matter what. Like, this is always the first step in scientific experiments, because we need to know, what's the problem, or we want to know how something works, right? So we need to ask a question. So when you're asking a question, you want to make sure that it's testable, right? Your question is, how does something work? What happens when? Or why does this thing, do this? All right. So make sure your question is testable. And most questions are, but sometimes we get a bizarre question that's not really testable. You can't, figure out the answer to it. All right. And then also, your question is going to want to focus on only one variable or detail. A variable is basically a detail. Only one detail that you're going to be testing, right? So, if you're wanting to know, which color seed birds like best, you want to focus on color. You don't want to focus on size too, right? So you don't want to say, what color and size do birds like the best? You want to focus on one variable at a time, okay? You may focus on color in one experiment and size in another, okay? But typically you always focus on one variable at a time. Now, once you have your question, you're going to identify your variables, okay, and the materials that you need. So like I just mentioned, a good experiment changes only one variable at a time, so that whatever results you get can be related back to that one change. So you can say, hey, yes, this is what happened, and so it has to be caused by that one variable, right? So going back to the birds and the seeds, you want to have all the same size seed. You may dye them different colors, but you want to have them all the same size, so that if you notice that they like the blue seeds the best, you can identify that result back to being the color blue and not being the size or the odor or the shape or something like that. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. When you are identifying variables and materials you need, you always want to have a control experiment in order to set up parameters. Okay, so your control, like for example, in the Cheeto lab, the very first experiment we did with the Cheetos, that was our control experiment. So as you think about redesigning this Cheeto lab to answer a different question, what you're going to do is you're going to use the results from the first Cheeto lab as your control. And then you're going to, for this redesign, you're going to change just one variable. Okay, so you're going to have the exact same setup that we did the first time around in the Cheeto lab, except only one thing is going to be different. Okay, whether it's a different substance that you burn, or a different liquid that you put in the can, or adding salt or sugar to the water, or putting like a shield around it. Only one of those variables is changed. All right, so that leads us to a discussion on independent versus dependent variables. Your independent variable is the thing that's not changed. Okay, so if you are, for example, in the Cheeto lab, if you are going to investigate a different type of food, like a peanut, right? The thing that the independent variable that is not changed would be like you're still going to have water in the can, right? Plain old water, just like we had before. Now, your dependent variable is the one that is changed. So that would be, changing your Cheeto to a peanut, right? So that whatever change you saw in your results, like for example, temperature, that temperature change can be related back to the fact that it's now a peanut instead of a Cheeto. Okay. All right, so that's your independent versus dependent variable. The independent is not changed. The dependent variable is the one that is changed. All right, last but not least, write down, don't be lazy, write down a list of all the materials that you need so that you can do good planning and good setup skills. All right, so a good scientific experiment is repeatable, okay? Somebody else has to be able to do it in their own lab and get the same results in order to, have, a statement or claim made from that, right? So good scientific experiment is repeatable. So what does that mean? You, my friends, need to not be lazy and write down all directions for your control and variable experiments. Okay, so write down every single step in detail. All right, so it shouldn't be like 2 words per step. Write complete sentences. Write down, don't write add water to the can. You got to write down how much. Add 100 milliliters of water to the can, right? Don't just say, put the Cheeto under the can. Put the Cheeto 2 inches from the can. Like you got to be detailed. Okay. All right. Now, obviously, once you've got your question and your variables, you have your setup and your procedure, now you can carry out your experiment, right? So number 4 is carrying out your experiment. And while you're doing it, you're not fooling around or not paying attention. You are also recording your data. That is going to be one of the most important parts of your experiment, is to record what you see and what numbers are changing. Are you looking at temperature? Great. What's the temperature changes? Record them after every 30 seconds or after every minute or something like that, or before and after. All right. So you want to make sure that you are always being careful and precise in your observations and measurements, right? We want to be as detailed as possible. So be detailed. The more details you observe and write down, detailed, not details. The more details you write down, okay, the easier it is going to be to analyze and make a claim later. Because Because guess what? That is step 5, analyzing your data. Okay, so we're going to look for patterns and trends in your data. All right, you're going to be making all required calculations to complete your analysis. So for example, in this Cheeto lab, we're going to be, using Q equals MC delta T, right? Just like we did in the first one. We're going to do it again. We're going to use that equation again in order to calculate the heat transfer to see if there's any difference between, control experiment and your variable experiments. You'll look for patterns, trends, like I said, and do your calculations. From there, you can do our final step, which is communicate your results, right? We've talked about CERs. We've written a couple practice CERs. So from analyzing your data, you should be able to come up with your claim, right? And from your claim, or to back up your claim, you need evidence from your, don't forget your evidence from your data, right? And then also reasoning, scientific and logical, right? Your reasoning needs to be scientific and logical, explaining how your evidence supports your claim. Okay, so communicate your results through a good quality CER paragraph to explain the answer to your question. Don't forget your evidence and your reasoning. Okay, those are the two most important parts. All right, so those are the basic 6 steps that you're going to carry out as you design your own experiment for not only this Cheeto lab, but for future labs this year.